Perfect.
Okay, guys. All right. So you can hear me. And that pretty much sums up what we're going to talk about. So thanks for the group for inviting me to have a conversation about bird recording vocalizations. I wanted to put this title in the notice that went out, but it was too long. But I'm going to put it here anyway. So what I wanted to say was you should never attempt to do this. But if I can't stop you, I might as well help. So that's kind of the theme of what we're going to go through here today. Why do I enjoy this? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what's behind the growing popularity of audio birding in general. And then if I can make this move forward, I'll talk about some considerations and best practices if you're going to be a little bit more conscientious about doing audio birding. And if we get to it, we'll talk about some of the specialized audio equipment and tools that are available. Specifically, I can show some of the stuff that I use. And then if we really get to it, before daylight changes again, we may get to where we can talk about some examples of recordings that I've made with some of the custom setup that I have, recordings from right here in Montgomery County. So that's a lot to get through with our technical difficulties, but we'll try. I was going to say, don't save your questions at the end. We already are seeing that. You can't see, so that was the first question. Okay, so why do I enjoy audio birding? And we already alluded to this in the introduction, but I got into audio birding in the blizzard of '77. So like Luke, this is during the blizzard up near Buffalo. That's not my grandmother's house that I was stuck at, but that's what it looked like for like a week. And so everybody just went stir crazy, and my grandmother finally got sick of 12-year-old running around and said, here's a bird book, here's my binoculars, go watch the bird feeders. And I did, and I loved it. So it was great. So on that, in the next few years, through the 70s and 80s, I spent time at Beaver Meadow, which is pictured here in the center. It's a nice little nature center out of Buffalo. It's run by the Ornithological Society. And so I really spent a lot of time doing birding with the Dave Junkin, who's a naturalist there, all sorts of naturalist stuff. That's why I wanted to be the forester. So that was nice, but it also introduced me at that same time, and there seems to be a lag here. There we go. To the Christmas bird count. So there was a Christmas bird count centered at Beaver Meadow. And so we would go out at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was shadowing the naturalist Dave Junkin. I guess shadowing at 4 in the morning is probably not a good word, but we were out early in the morning, and we were listening in this valley. On either side, we were trying to listen for owls, and we couldn't hear a whole lot of anything. At least I couldn't. And then Dave, out of the trunk of his car, pulls out this parabolic mic and says, oh, here, let's listen through this. And that was unbelievable. We could hear owls, barred owls up on the ridge. We could hear the dairy equipment getting set up down the road. It was everything. It was unbelievable. So I was hooked immediately at that point. Loved the idea of audio birding. But, as life goes on, as they were talking about, I went to grad school, jobs, whatever. I never really returned to the birding, and seriously, until the pandemic. Again, I was going stir crazy. And hey, I need to do something. I was back to birding. So just like learning how to ride a bicycle, you don't forget. I just picked right up with it immediately. And locally, I've been running with it pretty much since. And it's been a lot of fun. But after 40 years of accumulating my allowance money, I was able to actually purchase some audio equipment. But that's me. Everybody's got a story, what gets into this. But it's very clear that a lot of people are getting interested in audio birding or ear birding, just listening to the birds. And, what is driving that? And it's a very simple one word is Merlin, is making this very democratized. Anybody can do this with Merlin at this point. You don't even have to be a birder. So this really has opened up a massive landscape. And then Merlin is a gateway tool to all these other resources. Once you get hooked into Merlin, either you have that bug where you want to move forward. And 1 second, I'm just going to try to admit somebody here. Either you have that bug and you want to dig deeper, or you're just happy using Merlin, and that's fine. But really, there's a lot of resources out there when you start to get curious from your experience with Merlin. So let's talk about Merlin. I should move this probably, huh? There we go. So let's talk about Merlin a bit here. The great thing about Merlin is it's free. That's the first thing that's nice about it. It's easy to use on your smartphone. You can put it on pretty much any device. It's available for download immediately. So you just go to the website, download it on any phone. You can use it pretty much anywhere now. And the other thing that's nice is some of us, as we get younger, we gain hearing in the upper register. No, wait a minute. As we get older, we lose hearing in the upper register. And so Merlin starts to hear things that we may not be hearing anymore. It's right there, but we can't necessarily hear it. So it's really nice for that as well. And the other thing that's nice about Merlin is if you want to test your skills, you can kind of have a competition between you and Merlin. Let Merlin hang out there and record and don't cheat and see what it sees. But this is really kind of nice to test your active listening skills. How well are you able to hear all of the complex soundscape and pick out what's going on in the background? So you might hear the blue jay and the robin singing, but you might have missed that goldfinch that popped overhead briefly. This is kind of nice because now it helps you just personally. You can start sharpening your skills with Merlin. So there's a lot of great things about Merlin, but there are limitations and challenges. So it's not end all be all. We'll talk about that in a bit. But it is, like I said, when you start if you get hooked in Merlin and you really want to dive deeper, there are some other resources available. And they continue to be free. So it's not hard to dive in and get access to these things. And Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a ton of tools available for anybody who's willing to dig through the site and find things. Of course, many or all of us use eBird at this point, so that's available. Macaulay Library has millions of photos, video, audio. It's got a very large library of contributions. That's awesome to go to if you want to compare or investigate what you saw or heard. That's a great resource. Birdcast, we were just in the group here talking, now the migration has started. It's nice to have an idea of when you might want to maybe go out and do some night flight call recording or listening. Birdcast can give you an idea of when to start listening. And then if you really want to dig deeper and know a little bit more about the birds, this happens to be the good part of this is subscription based, but Birds of the World is a really great resource because it pretty much pulls together a lot of reference material about every bird species, and they keep it up to date from molting patterns to egg colors to song patterns, all sorts of stuff. So that's a nice resource as well. And then Cornell actually has a really great tutorial on audio birding. So much of what I'm going to speak of here, you can go on there and really dive in deep to look at a lot of the tools and techniques and ideas on their website. But if we return to Macaulay Library, what they've done is they've incorporated the Peterson Field Guide to bird sounds within this frame set. Now, I happen to have a print version here with me. You're not going to see that, but it's nice to have that handy. But importantly, in the field guide, in the very beginning of it, it has a nice sound tutorial. And what this does, and I'll move forward through here. So here's examples of the Peterson guides. This is what they look like. There's one in the east and one in the west. But they have this how to visualize sounds. And really what this helps, if you're new and getting into this and you really want to start communicating, when you have a regular bird book in the front, it's got a picture of the bird and it's got all the parts of the bird, the primaries, whatever, the neck. There's different names that go with the parts of the bird, and it's all there. Well, here we need to have a different vernacular. We need to speak the language of the sounds. And so they do a nice job introducing us to all the different sound information. So the first thing is we see this in Merlin all the time, but there's a spectrogram. If you're running Merlin, you see at the top, there's all these squiggly lines and stuff going on. And that's a spectrogram that's showing you the bird sounds and what they translate into visually. So, they go in and talk a little bit more about the nature of the spectrogram itself, but then we have the parts of, the sound itself, right? And, they go through the different pitch patterns. So you have an idea of, monotone, up slurs, down slurs, over slurs, under slurs. Then there's even tone qualities that they'll take you through. So, again, this is just so everybody's on the same page in terms of how to describe things, right? So whether you've got whistled sounds or hoots, ticking sounds, buzzing sounds, noisy sounds, nasally sounds, or very polyphonic, very busy sounds, all these different tonal qualities. It's information that's out there so that you have an idea how to communicate about what you might have heard when you need help. And then again, those are the basics of the sound, but then it's also the bird sounds themselves. So it may be that when you're out there and you heard a bird, you could say, well, it sounded like what this peep looks like when I see it on the spectrogram. So you can start to use the terminology for the actual bird sounds, or if you're writing it out and using vowels or semi-vowels, you can start to use them in a way that will help people understand what you heard. And again, when you get more complex shapes involved, and it's a combination as a language, if almost. So they do a nice job on the front of that tutorial. Okay, but those aren't the only resources. And again, all these things are at no cost to you. So it's not hard to get addicted and enter into this space at this point. So Merlin does all this stuff on your phone. If you happen to have files that you want to move out of Merlin, we'll talk about that later. You can always move into something like BirdNet, which is available either online, you upload files, or you can set it up on your desktop. But what it does, it offers a little bit different algorithm, but it also listens to that same file and it says, oh, I think with such and such confidence levels, what we heard at this point in time were this bird, and maybe this bird with this confidence level. So BirdNet's another great resource to do for species identification. Xenocanto is another great resource. It's a audio repository. Now, the great part about Macaulay is that you've got a lot of things that you can look at online, pictures, audio. You can't download them easily. You have to get special administrative privileges and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, because you can go over to Xenocanto and you can find very similar information, and then you can just download it immediately. And so now it's nice to download those things, because then you can put them into your software, and you can put something that you saw or something that you heard, and you can see what it looks like in a spectrogram next to something else. So you can educate yourself by using these tools at no cost. Now, Warbler Guide there is cost to getting the guide, and there's a print version available. I just bring this up because what they've done in the Warbler Guide itself, although it's all about warblers, there's a section on sounds. And so they have a whole section dedicated to the bird, the night flight calls, chip calls, their songs as well. But this is nice, an example. You can see what the chip calls look like. Is somebody trying to ask a question or something? Yeah, I see chat window here, but I'm not going to get that. We're going to have to wait at this point. Okay, so then you also have the audio software that I've been referring to that you can put on your laptop. And these, again, there are paid versions that are very sophisticated, but for the most part, you can use free versions. I use Audacity. I don't pay for it at this point yet, and I use it a lot, and I haven't found a reason to pay for an upgrade. But Raven is from Cornell Labs. Raven Pro is their top shelf one. Raven Lite is what you could use, like Audacity. There's other ones out there. And then there's social media where, you learn things, you find stuff, you can't find something, you have questions. The first thing that you do is you come to this bird club group and you ask questions. And then when they're befuddled, you go online and ask Facebook groups or Discord groups. There's a lot of groups that are available to talk about audio birding. So let's return to Merlin and the limitations and challenges that arise using Merlin. So you like Merlin, and it's pretty good, but now, okay, wait a minute. Some people might start to notice a few things. So if you've been a Merlin user for quite a while, it used to be that you could hear that barred owl caterwauling, and it'd give you some goofy bird from Malaysia. So what has happened is recently Merlin is now limited to the expected birds in your area. This solves a problem of a lot of false positives being reported. And when I say false positives, you should read that as Merlin heard. If we had a dime for every time Merlin heard something over the years, we'd afford better equipment here. The Merlin, so we want to get away from this gospel of Merlin, like, oh, it heard it, it's just absolutely true, right? A lot of that were false positives. So Merlin was identifying a call as the wrong bird. But, if you don't know better, you don't know that. And so when you submit your eBird report, the eBird reviewers are just pulling their hair out, having to go through a million of these, I say a million, a lot of calls that really were not real, right? So it's a way to fix this kind of thing. Another challenge here is it's limited to it's an algorithm, so it's limited to high confidence calls, right? So with a lot of your AI algorithms, they're going to put a pretty high cutoff. Now, we know with real world situations, birds have a lot of natural variability in their call signatures. And in Merlin, when you hold your phone up and it's listening to a blue jay, and you're waiting for it to call a blue jay, because even it's a blue jay, and all of a sudden, like Merlin says, it's hearing a bird, but it doesn't show what bird it is. What's going on here? Well, it may very well be possible that the algorithm that was trained on a certain sound of blue jay doesn't sound like the one you're listening to, even though it's a blue jay, because of a very high threshold cutoff. So again, this limits false positives. It's just another way. And so a lot of times it won't make a call on a bird that darn well. It's right there. You know what it is. Not there. Don't hear it. This is one reason why this starts to happen. It also is limited in sensitivity. So they use these training sets that work over a call window size. And I'll just use an example and say, let's say it was a 3-second window of several seconds of window size that it's going to listen for. And then it's going to take that window and it's going to crank it through its algorithm and come up with an answer. And that's fine for, a warbler song, no problem. But if you want that warbler chip call or a sparrow chip call that lasts 50 or 200 milliseconds out of a 3-second window, that's a very small piece of information that gets lost in a sea of noise. And so a lot of times it just can't pick that out and it doesn't make the call, or it won't make it correctly. And it's getting better at those sorts of things, but these are limitations of Merlin, right? They're not limitations of your phone though, necessarily, okay? But the upshot is that there is a bias towards false negatives. At this point, there are going to be real birds that are just not going to be identified. Now, that's the sort of a downside with Merlin. Now, even though that's a downside with Merlin, the deal is the bird has been recorded. And that's the important part. Okay. And we'll get back to that. Now, there's some other limitations that you end up with Merlin if you start doing this a lot. It's nice to use it and start it. And those of us who started it and forgot to shut it off, we know what that does. So it uses a lot of memory and a lot of battery, okay? And that can be a big problem. So if you want to listen for a 5-minute snippet of what's going on, that's great. But if you're staking out the whippoorwill for an hour and you just, it's a 10-second call, it gives 3 calls and it's done. By the time you futz around with your phone, you've lost it. So you just like, oh, I'm just going to wait it out. Well, good luck with that on your phone. So these are challenges on the phone. The other challenges that might occur depending on the system you're working with are exporting and importing files. So this is where we start to cross over and get into the, you become just a casual Merlin user to an addict. Is if you are interested in understanding what Merlin or your phone might have recorded that Merlin didn't call, then you might say, okay, well, I want to export these files and I can look at them someplace else. On an Android system, which is what I use, it's very easy to import or export. On the iPhone system, I don't have an iPhone, but it's either not necessarily as easy, or in some cases, you can't do things at all. So it depends. But the idea here is that there is a way generally to export files from either system. And that's the idea you're going to want to be able to do is if you're push Merlin to the limit and now you're ready for more, you can take those files from your phone and go someplace else, because the phones have excellent microphones for the most part. They're recording WAV files. And now how do you access those things? So let's download them, put them on our computer. And now we're going to use some of those audio analysis software tools that I was talking about. I tend to use Audacity. So now here's just a screenshot of Audacity as it's set up. Looks like Merlin. It's just a big version of Merlin, the window you see in Merlin running on your phone, just on a computer screen. It's just a lot more information, that's all. On the first glance, okay? So now what we're able to do, and I don't know if I can use the mouse or what I can use to point out. I guess we'll have to wait. So now the thing is that you have all this information, and you might think, well, did I miss something? Maybe Merlin didn't call something. So for instance, Now this happens to be a chip call that's at the very front end of a grasshopper call, okay? But the reality is you might not know that if you're a beginning birder. You're like, hey, that's thing standing alone. What is that? Well, in Merlin, you can't zoom in to see what that is. When you in the audio software, you can expand that view very nicely. And what you find is that there's a lot of architecture hidden in that little chip. And we can use that to identify birds. Merlin, you can't do that so much, but you can certainly use these audio software tools to get at that kind of information. Same thing here. You have a complex soundscape, and there may be birds hidden behind a lot of other bird calls that Merlin, it's just too complicated, and Merlin misses it. So that field sparrow in the mid-range there is calling loudly, and that grasshopper sparrow at the top, it might get drowned out, right? And then finally, the other way you might find value in moving things from Merlin to analysis software is that the low end, where we hear owls and bitterns. Merlin has a lower confidence calling those because that's naturally where a lot of noise resides, and you can't clean the noise up in Merlin easily. Here, the audio software, we can do a lot of normalization, and some of those low calls will just pop right out at you, and you'll see them right away. So knowing these things are doable on a manual version of desktop software, now it behooves you when you're running Merlin to try to do the best you can do to get the best file recorded, even if Merlin's not going to make the call. Okay, and so this is where it leads us into, okay, well, what do I need to do, best practices to get that best recording? Maybe Merlin's going to make the most of it, maybe it won't, right? So the whole game here is to maximize the signal to noise ratio. What do we mean by this? Okay, so the signal is going to be that bird that you're listening to that you really want to record. Now, the ideal way to do it, and we'll talk about this later, is with a 32-bit float recording device. Those sorts of devices on a continuous recording scale can record without loss of information the quietness of a mosquito buzzing all the way up to a volcano exploding. Right, and nothing's lost, nothing's clipped. It's all there. You just have to zoom in to find what scale you need to be in. A phone's not going to do that, right? So you're kind of limited in terms of what you're now. Not yet, they're not doing that. So if you're working with a phone, you have to think about this a little more carefully. Obviously, get as close as you can without disturbing it. This is always the case, right? Get as close as you can to get a picture. Same thing to get audio. But then there's the idea of minimizing the sounds of noise. This we can try to get our hands around a lot more. And what kind of noise are we talking about? Well, weather elements. You got wind sound, you got rain, you've got running water. Nothing like sitting in the Hughes Hollow parking lot after a rainstorm like this came through. If I was sitting there in the morning and there's a little babbling brook coming down the back hill, and I'm waiting to hear something, Sora or something, and all I hear is this babbling running water. That's just not good. So, you can move, right? You can recognize that that's going to be a problem when you go to look at your file and move your location. Same thing with wind. Wind can be a problem. When we talk about some of the microphone tools, there are tools that you can use to minimize wind problems. Traffic is a nightmare around this place. So when I got into audio birding back in 2020, we had the pandemic. There were no airplanes. There was no road traffic. John was very happy to go park up at Isaac Walton in the morning, and it was pristine. There was nothing but birds and mammals or whatever, but no traffic. And then, of course, air traffic picks up, and if the wind's just right, the planes coming into Dulles go right over Isaac Walton every minute, and it just gets tiring, right? It's awful. So, we have to think about air traffic, and that's a significant problem when you start to take recording more seriously, actually, because it does cause a variable noise problem that you have to deal with. Road traffic is the same sort of thing. So, instead of sitting at Isaac Walton listening for woodcock on a Monday morning when everybody's grumbling on their way to work, I should maybe wait till a Saturday morning when everybody's home after their favorite bartenders from the bird club were serving them. So you have to think and plan potentially in terms of how to minimize some of these challenges. And then there's the non-bird animal sounds, right? Insects are terrible. Last year we had cicadas. Just in general, crickets are a problem. Right now, peepers are disastrous, right? And then you have mammals. It's not just the insects and frogs. You can be sitting out at the polo grounds and all of a sudden the pack of coyotes works its way up, and oh my goodness, there goes that. right? Or, there's a fox that's in heat and she's barking her head off for the longest time. It's a disaster. So you got to try to position yourself and be aware of what's going on around you to try to minimize how those things will impact what you're trying to record. And then, of course, there's the domestic animals, at 4:44 a.m., at dark 30, when I'm out there, the rooster starts crowing, right? And he's just so happy to crow every 30 seconds. It's a problem. And then there are industrial noises. So if you're trying to do night flight calling from your home, you could get a bucket mic. I'll show you something like that later. And you could just point it up and you say, hey, this is great. I'm just going to listen to birds. Except if you live in a residential area like I do, where there's 50 townhouses and there's 50 air conditioning units clicking on and off at various random times throughout the night, it's a disaster, right? Car alarms are another problem, right? And not just the alarm like the, breaking into the car, but it's the little beep, 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 beep. Somebody come home at 10:30 after their favorite time with their bartender from the club here, and they're beeping their car to make sure it's locked. Well, again, if you got 50 houses around you, you're getting a lot of car beeps over the evening in your recording. So these are things to consider when you're trying to minimize noise. When you're live listening, it's bad enough. But if you're going to take that file and try to do something with it, you need to think about some of these things and expect those noise elements to be present. Okay, so there's all these challenges with recording if you're going to use Merlin or your phone. So far, everything we've talked about, you can pretty much do at no cost to you. It's very easy to get into using some of these tools. Certainly the software, it's worth spending the time to get used to working with some of those software things before you even bother to get expensive equipment, because you're going to, ultimately dump those files into the software. And that's really your ability to work with that's going to be as much as anything else. So it's worth doing that. But if you insist on spending a lot of money, I can help you. So now we have detectors that we can talk about. We have recorders, we have analysis software, and then there are accessories to go with all these things, right? So with the detectors, okay, the cheap free detector that we can all use is our phone, but now we start to get into the more expensive things like microphones. And now we're starting to talk about some more complicated stuff we have to think about. So what's the directionality of this recording going to be? Or do I have an idea what I'm going to try to do? Do I want, you see up in the upper left-hand corner here, do I just want something that's omnidirectional, maybe a little more expensive, but similar to what my phone does? Or do I want something like what I have, which is a super carotenoid? It's this very focused forward and a little bit in the reverse behind you, but not much on either side, right? So you have to think about some of these, or you should think about some of these things. What do you want to accomplish with a microphone? And then you can get it. You could do it stereo. You could have two of them set up and perpendicular. There's all kinds of things. Again, it's only money, so you can spend as much as you want. I happen to work with a Sennheiser brand. This is the picture of the mic I have for those on the call. Here I have the stuff in front of us here. We can go look at that stuff in a moment. But this shotgun mic is about, I don't know, what is that, 8 inches long. It's a big mic. And even though I call it a shotgun mic, it's not the shotgun pattern that you see on the engineering on the left. Okay, and then you have to think about power. Again, if you're working with a phone, you can get microphones that'll externally connect to your phone that don't require an external source of power. But a lot of these more expensive microphones do require what's called phantom power. They need power to drive the microphone in addition to the recorder or your computer or your phone or whatever else you're using. And so those requirements you have to think about. So I can't run this microphone. I can't plug this microphone into my phone and run. I can't use Merlin on my phone and hold this nice fancy microphone out there and listen, because it's not compatible. I wish I could. Recorders are another thing to consider. So when we talk about recorders, there's a lot of different recorders, but what's important is the file format. Now, there's a lot of different file formats, but the two on the extremes basically are WAV files, which are lossless. So they capture everything. And when you copy them, when you transfer them, when you move them, they don't lose content and information. MP3s, they're much smaller, so they're much more easily worked with for sending emails to reviewers who don't believe what you've submitted. But at the same time, they're lossy. So the more times you open and close it and copy it and move it, it loses content. It gets less reliable. Now, probably not if we do it 1 or 2 times, but so that you need to think about the file formats, mainly because of the size. If I do an overnight recording with my equipment, it'll generate a 4 gigabyte file. And that's not something that I'm going to email to Mark. Sensitivity is another thing. As I mentioned, the 32-bit float is pretty much the gold standard. And these days, there's no reason why, even with the lower end recorders, you should be able to get 32-bit float. What that does mean is there's no sound clipping for loudness. If you get a blue jay or a bunch of crows chasing a owl right next to the microphone, it's not going to get clipped. It's just going to, you'll be able to normalize that down where you will not lose any information. You also have to think about portability. Is this something you want to be able to carry in your hand? Do you want to be able to have it in a case that you can sling over your shoulder? Or maybe it's not, it doesn't have to be portable. You can set up a bucket mic right in your own house. You're not going to move that around. You're going to set it up on your roof and it's done, right? So you have to think about the situations in which you're going to use these tools. And then again, the power that's going to drive the tools, whether they're, enclosed batteries like in your phone or whether they're going to be rechargeable ones. And if you're doing an overnight remote power, remote session listening, if I take my microphone that I have here, my Sennheiser, and I set it up at Hughes Hollow to listen overnight for 12 hours, I need a power supply because the batteries aren't even going to be able to cut it. So you have to think about some of these things. Now, what I happen to use as a recorder is the sound devices. For those of you who are listening, unfortunately, you couldn't see me throw my sound devices recorder off the back of my truck onto hard pavement at 50 miles an hour, but those of us here saw that. It's an expensive device, but it still works. It's like one of those Timex commercials. I should probably get money for this. And then you have special detector recorder combinations. Now, I like to use what's called an audio moth. An audio moth is nice because it's this small device. You can see by the size of the little coin there. It's very nice and unobtrusive. It runs on battery power, and you can put it in the field. So now, if I don't want to be down, I don't know, pick your favorite spot to go look for a cerulean warbler, maybe on Hunting Quarter Road as it crosses. And I'm like, oh, geez, again, I'm not going to sit here. I don't know. What are my odds of hearing that? But I can let this thing sit there for 5 days and it'll record 24/7. And I can go back and look at the files and see, did one come by here, right? So those are the ways you can start to use some of these tools. Or you can just sit in the comfort of your home and use something like a haiku box. I mean, there's those of us who in the audience, I know Dave has one. These are handy because, again, what they're going to do is they're going to listen. They're going to send that out to your home network, and then it's going to, in real time, using an algorithm somewhere between Merlin and BirdNet, it's going to use that algorithm to tell you exactly what's going on in real time in your yard or wherever you're listening. So that's a really handy device. And then, as I've referred to, there's bucket mics that you could set up for night flight call recording. These are not terribly expensive, but they are very dedicated. And then there's analysis software. We've talked about several of these, so I won't necessarily go into that. But what's nice about the software is that you can start to play with the parameters. Like I said, one of the things that's nice is that when you have these little sparrow tweets or night flight calls out of a warbler, it's a 50 millisecond little blip on a Merlin screen, but you can expand that to take up half of a computer screen, and you can really start to look at what that profile looks like and identify it. And then if you really want to have somebody find help for you, you can do programming scripts. So now there's even more advanced tools that you can go for bird identification, and they're very customized. So there's things like Python Merlin that you can take a file and run Merlin on your computer, and I could take that 4 gigabyte 12-hour overnight call, and I can run it through Python Merlin in a few minutes, and it'll tell me all what it heard, as good as Merlin does. Nighthawk is another software. So as I said, one of the limitations of Merlin, even I let it run overnight, is that it missed those little tiny calls. But Nighthawk is optimized with its algorithm to identify the little sparrow cheep calls or thrush calls or the warbler calls. And so it does a better job of calling the birds that it hears. And then, of course, you can upload files to Merlin or BirdNet. So there's ways you can do that as well. So, and then there's the accessories that go into making these tools more optimized and specialized. You can see here's a group that I took this from the Cornell website. These guys are out using various accessories with their equipment. So I have something like this shotgun mic, right? I have it encased in a blimp that has a wind coat over the top of it to cut down on wind noise, with a grip, and this grip, the mic is encased inside in a sling that just hanging very loosely so that I'm not picking up my high blood pressure when I'm waiting for that rare bird coming through the microphone, right? It isolates any hand holding noise as well as anything else. Or you could have a parabolic mic. Now, I know around here, I know Jared uses a setup like this. I don't know that I've seen anybody else with a parabolic mic here locally, but he does this routinely, right? So it's still a microphone of various sorts that are in the center of this parabola, but you've got a parabolic dish to focus what happened here? What happened here? Okay, let's return to this meeting here. I'm getting a bad feeling that these guys on the call are not going to hear these things. So there's different accessories that you can use for the microphone, headsets. There's choices with, I use a wired headset. The wired headsets are nice because you can get real-time audio. They're really bad because they're just a tangled mess. You get them caught in the car door, you trip over them. It's just a disaster to use wired headsets. I'll tell you, it's just no end of frustration with those things. But they are real-time audio. And you say, well, who cares? Well, you can use a Bluetooth headset, which is cord-free convenience. So you can leave your setup outside and you can just listen in the comfort of whatever you're doing with a Bluetooth headset. But there is a signal lag. Now, if you're not listening live, the signal lag may not be a problem. But if you're standing out on the dike and you're listening live with one ear to try to figure out what direction to point. Uh-oh. Yeah.
We're not seeing slides. We're just seeing each other.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Here we go again. How does this happen? So I gotta. How am I sharing? Where did it doesn't even give me the.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so now it's telling us that you can see my screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm just going to try to clean this up again. Okay, are you still able to see?
We got accessories.
No, it's showing the lottery number winners. You're not seeing that?
Sorry, no, but
Okay,
we are seeing specialized audio equipment and tools. Accessories.
Okay,
We're there.
we're there. Okay, so we have, we're talking about the headsets. So I'm just talking about the difference between listening in a Bluetooth headset. It's convenient, but there is a little bit of a lag. And if you tend to listen with a live ear out of one ear in the headset and the other, because you got the sensitivity of the microphone, it can kind of cause a little bit of screw with your brain a little bit because you're hearing things off cycle a little bit. And then there's, again, you can see here, these guys are using recorder bags to carry things. I have examples of that stuff here. And then again, the detector accessories we were talking about, you can get a parabola. People will use low band cutoffs to get rid of some noise. I don't recommend that for us because we lose the bitterns and the owls if you do that. But if you want to just set this up overnight or stand it somewhere where you don't have to hang on to it, you can use the same old tripods that we were used to using. I talked about the guns and grips that these guys are using in this picture here, just so you can point it easier. And then the blimps and windshields, again, these are the things that you see on these mics. These guys are trying out to be holding microphones for the local football team on the sidelines, pretending to be birders. And then there's other stuff here that you can get, cables and camera sync equipment, but there's a whole host. But there's a really important accessory that I found that I like to use a lot. Okay, so you can use phones and laptops for real-time stuff as well. That gets more advanced. But the accessory that I like to use is my sunroof. So what I do is I prop my mic up through my sunroof, hands-free, outside. So now I can sit and drink coffee in the comfort and warmth of my truck in an early winter morning. And it's like this. So it's pointed out and it's picking up noise, and that's grand and dandy. And if something interesting shows up, I can get out and go listen to it. But I can also go trolling. So now when I drive down Hunting Quarter Road or I'm out on River Road in Patton, I can just drive along nice and slow, and I'm recording the whole time, and I'm picking up, it might be horned larks over here, you know, oh, that's where they are. Okay, now I can stop and go look for them, right? So it's a nice way to just kind of troll for birds and find them. And when you find them, then you can stop and go do more with them. So that's what I like. All right, so I don't know what we have here for time, but the last thing I wanted to talk about are some examples of recordings that I've been able to make over the little bit of time here in Montgomery County. So one thing are barn owls. This is actually they're migrating now, so it's not you should be able to go out and you might actually hear them. And here's a recording of a barn owl that I made here, I don't know, a couple of years ago. So it's just that screech right there in the middle. And of course, on a recording like this, it doesn't strike you as much as it does when you're out there live. And it's just, wow, right? But you can pick those up. Now, what's interesting here, back in February, I actually came across a roost of long-eared owls. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this to play or not. I can't open that. So what I would play for you, although this Mac doesn't like that, I guess. Okay. Is you can just hear continuously these hoots for several minutes of at least one, probably more than one long-eared owl, which is fascinating here to hear. You just don't get that much. I mean, Stephen got a nice picture one here. So last year or the year before? It was recently. But you know, to find these is unusual. But then it's fun also to go out for woodcock. Now, this is the time of year we don't want to go out and listen for woodcock. And so I bring this one up because here's an example. I'm just going to jump ahead here. You can see the paint on there. Oh, wait, there's those mammals.
We're not hearing anything.
Oh, boy, they're not hearing it. Yeah, you might not. I don't know what to say on the line. What you would be doing is you'd be hearing coyotes howling loudly, which I'm not going to do for you. What's that?
Someone was offering to do.
Yeah. So I apologize online. It's probably the audio the way it's wired here. You're probably just not going to be able to hear some of these things. But then these are the more traditional peents that you hear, right? It's just that loud. Yeah, that's really right there in front of you, kind of peent, and it just goes on and on and on, as you can see from the picture. And then sometimes
traffic noise.
Yes. Now, what's nice here is you can get not just the painting, but then the display. And you might hear it, or you can see it.
But I hear it.
Yeah. So that's what that does. And then we can go for other things like I talked about a whippoorwill stakeout, right? You can go and you can listen for whippoorwill. Now, when you just record for a long time, it's only 33 seconds to call. Right? So that's nice. But if you're waiting with your Merlin app and it's in your pocket and you got to dig it out, open the phone. Oh, they want a password. Something happens, right? By the time you get to record, you get the last whip. And then you're done. Yeah, will. Yeah. Now, if you're lucky, you will get the longer, here's a longer bird, but we're not going to listen to 2 minutes. But yeah, here's an example where it just went for 2 minutes. Very nice, right? And it's just such a nice sound to hear. But you can get all this here. We can listen to all these. We can find them. Grasshopper sparrows. I don't know. I like grasshopper sparrows. What's interesting is to get the long dawn song call. I don't know how many people hear that, but what you see you'll start to see here in a couple of. I'm going to advance it here. You'll see here this little chittery squiggly marks behind that main call. And same thing here. That's the long dawn song. You can start to really see it show up here.
It's a deeper sound.
Oh, that's the noise. That's noise. Yeah. Again, I could zero out the noise, but I gave this raw to Macaulay. There's the turkey. So you get the longer dawn song calls, which are really kind of nice to hear all that fluttering and whatnot. But there is the times when it just sounds like a distant insect too, right? So then you just get the, is that, what is that, right? Oh, did I hear something? Oh yeah. Did I? Yeah, that's not a cricket, right? No, that's not a cricket. So, this is what you get. But, it's hard to find that. Now, on a microphone with a good mic, you can point that out in the middle of a field and pick that up. But on a Merlin may not hear that at all. Okay, so those are things we can do. Now, what really gets interesting is if you try to do warbler or thrush night flight calls, right? And you can get hundreds or thousands of these events in a single recording, especially, and sometimes you can get hundreds of these things within an hour or less. They just crash down as dawn hits, and they just come in calling. And so, unfortunately, I don't think I'm not even going to try. I would be able to show you a very long, several hours of recording that I've consolidated into one screenshot to see these hundreds of flight calls of the various birds with their chip calls that you could find in Peterson or Warbler Guide. And sure enough, you can use those guides to easily identify them with the audio software. And then it's also nice to just hear a morning chorus start, right? It blossoms from just absolute nothing but crickets into this really complex soundscape that you can use to. Where's Mark? To put your grandson to sleep with or something. Yeah. So the short summary is very much this: if you see this person and his dog in the field birding, you should run away. Now, Scott didn't take this advice. He took this picture instead.
No.
And with that, that's all I got for you.
Hi.
Thank you, Susan. Question come up here so the
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah, actually, so let's just see here online. I'm going to try to look at it's hard to do the talking and looking at the chats to see if the chat is anything other than technical stuff. But I'm going to just scroll through. Okay, so the last one is thanks for this. I want to know if I can hook up my phone or carry separately so that Merlin hears what I hear. I often hear something and Merlin does not hear. I just want an ID. Be great to have something light and easy to carry. So I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're trying to do here. Maybe you're just saying you want something light and easy to do where you have a more advanced microphone that you could plug in or sync up to your phone. You don't want to get into expensive equipment or anything. You just want to have a phone with maybe a little bit better of a mic, which people do. In fact, if I'm able to go into the presentation here, oh boy, I don't know where it went. There he is. I'm going to go to this picture. And what you see, if I just try to move this out of the way, I don't know if you can see this online or not, or on Zoom, but this person's got a microphone plugged into a phone. It's just with a windshield on to keep it from making a lot of noise. And I think there's several people here that do that actually. So
I've done it. I'm the one who asked the question, and I've done that, and it's not enough.
Well,
I'm just lucky. I have really good hearing, and I often hear stuff, and I'm like frustrated because Merlin doesn't pick it up.
That's that. So I'm not sure when you came into the call, but that is what I mentioned early on is there are absolutely limitations in Merlin, and that is what happens. That's why when you get frustrated like that, Cornell wants you to spend more money. They want you to buy like equipment and buy the expensive equipment so that you can hear those things with your tools. But I agree. I actually am pretty good. I can hear a lot of stuff as well, and Merlin doesn't pick it up for me either.
Right. A microphone isn't going to solve this problem.
No. Well, no. Yeah. So a microphone on your phone won't solve the problem, but expensive recording equipment will absolutely solve your problem.
So what's the cheapest expensive recording equipment that I could try? I mean, I'm willing to carry a parabolic. Is that what I need?
I can tell you, Jared Fisher actually has created an ingenious little setup. That parabolic mic you see in the picture right there, he's got a nice little parabolic mic, and he's got a disposable phone that he picked up for like, $10 that is plugged right into that microphone that's on the parabola, because it's not a phantom power driven microphone. And it does a great job picking up and feeding into Merlin on the phone. And I don't think that's about, I don't know what that costs, but that's about the cheapest solution you're going to find before you start to get into more expensive solutions.
But what?
All right, so can we beg Jared to share that with us?
You didn't hear me say that, because I'm sure Jared doesn't want to be pestered.
Yeah. No, I'm on the call too.
Yeah, I saw that you're on the call, so I'm like, I'll take a flyer.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you would be willing to write something for the next chat or email or whatever. Then we would all know.
Yeah.
That
At
would be
least to you,
awesome.
I could very quickly just tell you the setup and show you a picture of what it looks like.
And Jared, that only cost you $10,000, you said?
No, it's not that. The parabolic is obviously the more expensive part there, and
Right.
you know, there are different levels there. The one I like is about $800, so it's not cheap. But there are varying levels for that.
Okay. Well, I love what I can do with Merlin, and I've tried the little mics that you plug in, and all I do is lose the little wind thing that goes on them.
No, I mean, you've exceeded the capacity of Merlin. You're not alone.
Okay.
It's a great tool to get in. Now you're on the bubble. Now you got to decide: are you going to spend a lot of money, or are you just going to, listen with your ears? I don't know. You have to decide, I guess. But yeah, it's frustrating. Merlin can be frustrating.
I have a similar question.
Thank you.
I have a similar question to Francesca, because I was thinking about this too.
And this is Paul.
Yes. And I saw microphones I can plug into my camera, either a camera to do live recording of a video, or or the just in my phone, so I can get better. But what I'm hearing is, no matter how good of a mic I can get into my phone, it's not going to improve Merlin.
No,
Not the Macaulay file.
No, that's right. It's not necessary. Now it may.
And so my point is, I really need that better software like Audacity or Raven.
And they're going to help you clean the file up so you can maybe put it back into Merlin or put it into another calling software. Okay. Some of those microphones, they'll have better fidelity, so they'll eliminate some of the noise, but ultimately they're not improving the calling mechanism itself. And that's in Francesca's
capturing the sound.
Yeah,
can read.
Right. Yeah, that's right. These become limitations that you run into.
Like you showed, you have a better microphone and that better software.
Now these are spot on questions. That's perfect.
And if anyone in the audience has a question, please come up here so the Zoom audience can hear you, since we're working off the laptop microphone.
I have a question.
Come up here, please, so you can be heard.
How much can you actually filter out once you get the...
We're still seeing the screen. Maybe you should take it down.
Oh, you're not seeing the lottery numbers?
Nope.
Just go full screen on it, or go to the gallery view.
I don't know.
So once you do the recording, you get it in. Oh, I'm sorry.
The mic's here.
Oh, sorry. Once you do the recording and you get it into Audacity or whatever you're using, how much can you actually filter out to isolate the sound? Given it is it like, for example, is it better to record it in a stereo format so you can knock out one side, or how do you do the filtering?
You can certainly you can record in many channels beyond stereo, even for that matter. But so the software, and this gets to be where this is talk number 2, where you go to intermediate, more advanced level conversations probably. But so you can use those softwares to filter things out, and that's where you want to have 32-bit float, because you capture everything, noise, very loud sounds, and then you use the software to normalize, which means it just keeps cutting back on the signal that the software sees until a lot of things are gone and only what you want is left, if it's loud enough, right? So the software can do a lot of that for you if what you are listening to is loud enough.
So you do the normalizing yourself, just using it as one.
I do one channel.
Just roll off stuff as you go up until.
No, I actually, so for the most part, I'll do a bit of normalizing. Again, this gets complicated, but I will do a little bit of noise normalizing. There's 2 things that I tend to do, which is I'll use a very low band filter to reduce the low end noise that tends to be loud, the airplanes, the road traffic, just low register noise. And then I will from there go and do a whole normalization of the whole spectrum basically and lower that until it looks good to me so that I can see on the screen that I can make calls, and usually I can hear them as well when I'm using it. So but yeah, that's art. It's an art. It's artwork.
Yeah, well, I'm a Pro Tools user, so, but I've never used it like you're doing it. So
Yep.
that's why I was asking.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot more we could talk about. This really what I'm trying to do here with this evening is say, hey, some of us, everybody uses Merlin. Some people are happy with what they got out of Merlin. That's perfectly fine. If you're starting to run into issues, which we are hearing here, then you can start to realize there are additional tools that you can get for free that you don't have to spend on to try to enhance your capabilities. And there's a lot of runway there before you actually have to start spending money.
Or buying a big software like Pro Tools.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, whether it's the software or the equipment, you can get a long way without spending money. Yeah. Yep.
Well,
Question on the screen.
What about Haiku Box? Well, I'm not an owner of Haiku Box, but we have at least one Haiku Box owner here who might be able to speak to Haiku Box. I think he gets a commission for selling them too. Oh, there you go. You already admitted he makes commission. I'm teasing. Dave
Yes.
Roberts is coming over here to
Dave
talk.
Roberts. I use Haiku Box in a chat about a year ago. I don't remember which one it was. I wrote an article about strengths and weaknesses, and some are the same as Merlin, that it mis-IDs purple finches and juncos and
Garbage
American
trucks?
trees, sparrow, and right, broadwing hawks and buses, bus brakes specifically.
Bus brakes.
But Haiku Box, you can also download files. The weakness of Haiku Box is that it records 3-second clips. And so for a bird like a yellow-throated vireo that has a song that's longer than that, it's not useful. But I have it running continuously, and there's a web app that allows you to look back at what it's been seeing, and it puts notices on my phone that, oh, there's an interesting bird being heard. So sometimes when a migrant shows up in my yard, I can run outside and find it.
what's that interval? 3 seconds, then what? And then 3 seconds.
It's continuously recording, but what it uploads is 3 seconds. So I think, John, you alluded a little bit to, there are devices that detect something and they only record when they detect something that's potentially interesting. So you can have a 24-hour recording and there's only 5 minutes in that 24 hours that's of interest. So rather than having gigabytes, what it saves is just little clips that are less than I think 300 kilobytes.
Yes, small enough.
So, and what's on Haiku Box, you can go back on the calendar with the app that's on your laptop, and you can say, oh, it heard something last Tuesday, I was out of town. You can go back and retrieve those recordings and then download them.
So how do you know that when you were out of town, it wasn't Scott over there just making some goofball noise with Merlin?
He wouldn't do that.
Okay, just want to make sure I understand.
You never know.
Scott's approaching the mic, beware.
Counter programming.
So I just, no, I don't use Haiku Box as much as Dave does, because of the 3-second snippets. I also have something called a Terra device, and that allows me to actually play the sound. Say I'm having breakfast or lunch and I can just listen. And if I hear something outside, I can look out the window and see what was there. But I was going to say that at least if you're a Mac owner with the newer chips M1 on, you can download the Merlin app directly onto your computer. So you can, I have an easy time, it seems, uploading my iPhone sound files just through Bluetooth to or Wi-Fi to my computer, I can drop those sound files either unmodified or after I do something in Raven Light to them right onto the Merlin app on my computer, and it'll tell me what it hears in that. So I find that pretty convenient.
I've got a question, John. It's Clive about, it's really about recording on your phone, and you covered a bit of it, but the thing I found with Merlin is I get the quality of recordings when I use Merlin doesn't seem anywhere near as good as when I use Voice Record Pro, which is another free one. And it's possibly there's something I'm not doing right with Merlin, but I can tinker around with the input gain on Voice Record Pro and just get much crisper recordings. So I'm wondering whether I'm missing something. And I don't know whether you've also looked at other ones. I was told the other day about another birding song recording app, which has a 2-second buffer. So before you press the record button, it's records, every 2 seconds. I don't know whether do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
I haven't played with those. I know there's different, phone apps that have come out, but I do agree with you that, by far and away, my suspicion, and you seem to be confirming it, the microphones on the phones are very good. And I suspect that it's how well the apps are built to make use of that. And if it's just a straight into a file and where you can control the gain, I have no idea how Merlin does that. I don't know what defaults they use at all. It probably isn't optimizing anything, but certainly, and I have used voice recorder before, but I don't go there. I just use Merlin, or I recorder. But that's an interesting point. And maybe that speaks to Francesca's issue. Maybe if you record the files and maybe you've done this, Clive, if you recorded with your recorder and then fed them to Merlin?
I don't do that either.
Okay, I mean, that might be interesting to see what happens.
Oh, could well be.
It's probably PPA. I mean, Merlin record much more high fidelity, right? It would kill your memory even faster, right? It's probably the balance.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know, when you do those recordings, I mean, what's the
They're
cutoff?
always short recordings.
No, I mean frequency range. What do you have for the mic range on a voice recorder versus Merlin?
On Voice Record Pro, I see things up to 20
Okay.
megahertz.
So you get the bats too.
The other thing I was going to just quickly mention is, I don't know if you've heard about it either. Last month, when I was in Colombia, I was shown an app developed by a Chinese programmer who scraped all bird calls. It's kind of, it's like Merlin, but has a broader thing. I don't know if you've heard of that.
There are several different types of bird call algorithms on GitHub. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but there's a lot of neural net capabilities now that are really moving up quickly. I haven't played with them, but I know there's a lot of other stuff out there. The thing to me is, if I can get a good recording, and I've got a hard drive full of recordings, I can always, as the algorithms improve, I can always go back and try to play with stuff. And I think that's going to be the rate limiting issue, is how good of a recording you can get. And with 32-bit float, it's just going to be the level of the mic noise and the range of the mic that can pick up.
Why? The Voice Record Pro, it's
free.
regular recording.
Free, yeah, it's just an app.
Field record.
Yeah.
It's just an app on.
Right on the phone.
Yeah, it's just an app
Yeah.
on your phone.
Yeah.
Next,
Thanks,
the chair's vacant.
Yeah, it's good.
So, you might have any more questions? Any more questions from the home audience?
So
or-
if the mic on my phone is good,
Yeah.
then I should use something instead of Merlin on my phone. I mean, you could try BirdNet. You could try some of these things that Clive is talking about. I think you could try to do some experiments and figure out using, and I don't know how you do this, I guess. If you have a control recording that you're playing, you could try to see how Merlin does to identify it, listen to the same recording separately with a phone app, and see how, when you feed that back to Merlin, is Merlin rate limiting or not? And if it is, then maybe you can find some other tool besides Merlin on your phone, or just use the voice, the Recorder Pro thing like Clive was saying, and just do the ID later, right?
Yeah, I'm impatient. I don't want to do.
I'm here to help you with the impatience, and it only takes money to make the impatience go away. I can tell you that. It works for me.
All right. I'm just trying to think. I mean, if somebody just said that the phone mics are good and
They
it's
are good.
Merlin that's the problem. So is there
Yeah.
another software to use that does what Merlin does, i.e. tell me what it is in situ that I could load onto my phone? And you're saying that maybe that's BirdNet.
Well, so BirdNet has a live version actually that you can download and put on your phone.
Okay, I'll try it.
Yeah.
I'll try it.
Scott wants to make a comment about, and there is a challenge with BirdNet. Go ahead.
The problem with BirdNet is you can't tell it where your recording came from.
Oh.
Merlin, you can direct it to
Yeah.
the place where you're seeing it all around the world.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we have an opposing view.
Oh boy, here we go. Wait a minute.
No, you can, there is an option, there's a setting in BirdNet you can choose.
On your phone.
Yes,
Okay.
and on your computer.
Yeah, on your
too.
computer, I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I'll try it and report back.
Yeah. No, this is good. I mean, you're at the limit. I mean, this is the idea here.
All right, I have one last.
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
This is Paul. To wrap up with, unless someone has a burning desire, and that is, we've talked about all this great equipment. I'm really drawn to that bucket mic. That's like old school, simple, low tech.
Okay.
I mean, I do that with my cell phone when I'm playing music and I'm out working outside.
Wait a minute. Let me
But
just.
here it's a receiving signal. I mean.
Okay,
sound.
I can see that Jared is still with us, and Jared actually has a bucket mic set up that he could speak to this if he wants to chime in, if he's able to.
I know the concept. I want to know in your picture why there's something over the top, obviously to keep
Just to
bugs
keep in,
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're falling into it, leaves.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like a cheesecloth. And inside the bucket is another container with like saran wrap over top of that to keep actual water out away from the mic. So it's a design created by Bill Evans up in New York, who's been doing night flight recording for many decades. So he's got a great design, and he charges about well, they're different models, but either like $250 or $400 for these mics, or you could kind of buy the parts from him and build your own. But the website to go to is called Old Bird, and you can read more about them.
So Jared,
great.
for that $200, could I take that bucket mic and take it out in the field instead of the parabola?
No, it's kind of stationary, I would say. So, you need to plug it in. I mean, you could run it off a car battery or something. Some people do that, but
Jackery.
I have never taken mine away from the house.
Okay.
I kind of treat it as my haiku box.
Okay. Thanks, Jared.
And that was, what was that website, Jared? Old
Bird.
Oh, like me. Okay. Good. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. Hey, thanks for everybody participating.
Thank you very much, John, and let everybody know this is being recorded, will be available in short order to review. I want to thank Paul Orsinger for helping out here with the technical aspects. And with that, we're going to close the meeting. Thanks, everybody, for attending.